Hello, you're listening to the Saluki Gamescast. This is episode 49 for June 14th, 2023. My name is Justin Young, and I'm joined, as always, by Alicia Utecht, Ryan Freels, and OJ Duncan. Hey, everyone's here.
I was saying, I think this
everyone's in the same room.
Our first summer episode this summer with everyone here.
It's been a while since we've all been in the same room together at the same time, so that's pretty cool. How's everyone been doing?
It's a little too late. I need to leave now. No.
Okay, Ryan.
Hey, that's me you're talking about.
No, OJ has to leave early to beat Ryan up in the parking lot. Don't you know that?
He's got to get his stretches in. He doesn't want to pull something like beating Ryan.
Oh, man.
Alicia, I know you went to the Superman Festival down in Metropolis, Illinois, the big city of Metropolis. So
oh, yeah.
How'd that go?
It was a lot of fun. My parents came down, and so we only went on Friday, which I think was perfect, honestly, because we were all expecting it to be bigger, and it's really just like they close off one street, and they have food vendors there, which is cool because then you don't feel bad about like going and spending your time in the Superman Museum and walking through and seeing all the cool stuff that they have there. But it was very much not what we were expecting. So I'm glad that we only planned on going for one day and then spent the other days that my family was here. You know, we went out to dinner with a couple of my friends who had traveled up to Minnesota earlier this year for a conference and got to meet my parents then. So went out to dinner with them, went and did trivia night at one of the local bars. So that was a lot of fun. We went Saturday afternoon, we went over to St. Louis and, you know, I went up the arch and did like the little riverboat cruise thing. Mm-hmm. So it was really good to have my parents here. I'm glad that, like I said, I'm glad that I went to Superman Days. I'm still salty that I didn't go last year because I cared a lot more about the celebrities who were there last year.
Sure.
But I'm glad I went. I feel like I don't need to go again unless if they bring back celebrities that I care about.
Right.
Celebrities that are here this year, send your hate mail too.
Yeah. Tyler Hoechlin is obviously listening to our podcast right now. I will say the guy who they had there, you know, they do the Superman statue and they have a guy there to be Superman. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, criminals show up and try to steal the statue and he's got to stop them. But he was really nice. We got our picture with him in front of the statue, and I have a T-shirt that's Superman, but kind of in the style of Van Gogh's Starry Night.
Okay.
And he was like, "Oh my gosh, that shirt is so cool! Where did you get that? I want to get one." So he was really cool.
I just like the idea of the real Superman seeing somebody's T-shirt of him and going, "That's so cool! I want one of those."
Right? It was awesome. We got sworn in as citizens of Metropolis, so I am now bound to be an ambassador, which means I probably shouldn't talk about how dinky the whole thing was. But
also, your apartment's probably going to get destroyed a few times.
Probably.
All right, well.
After offensive remarks, Alicia was stripped of her ambassadorship.
No, but it was a really fun time. I'm really glad that we got to go. And it was good, you know. My dad's always been more of a Marvel guy than a DC guy, but I've always been more DC. I'm the black sheep of the family. So it was really neat getting to, and man, the Superman Museum, just incredible. And the gentleman who donated everything and got it started, you know, he was there, and he's probably in his 90s now. Mm-hmm. And so having him be there, you know, they did a rededication of the Superman statue because they just finished repainting it and all that, and it was just so cool. They gave him like a little bit of time to talk. It was incredible.
Nice.
All right, sounds good. Ryan, OJ, how about you? Anything exciting going on?
Okay. So I had to stare off.
The two of them are just like pointing at each other across the table. No, you.
Me and a friend finished watching Evangelion. It's still up there with Owl House for my favorite show of all time. Nothing changed there. But it was really cool to like show that to someone and like for them to get to see it and then like get to like see why I loved it so much. Aside from that, we also she got me into watching Cobra Kai, which is not a show I was initially that interested in, but now I am very into. Like, I did not expect like the writing in that show to be as good as it is. It's like it's actually like really well written, and like I really like the character arcs and development and how it like reflects on stuff like class issues and stuff within the show.
I don't think anyone expected that show to be good when it first came on.
No, it's like now I kind of want to go back and watch the Karate Kids, like, because like this also has like some like it's a sequel series, it's not a prequel, but it has like some stuff that's like, you know, like before Karate Kid happened, this happened to this character and so, and like kind of want to go back and watch it with context and but I'm surprised by how much I love it.
Have you ever seen the Karate Kid films?
Oh yeah, I watched all of them when I was a kid, and I know I think I pretty repetitively watched the first one on VHS when I was a kid.
Yeah, it does like provide some interesting context, like when characters come in and everything, and you know it helps fill in some of the backstories of characters and stuff. So it's pretty cool.
Like when Johnny was talking about why he didn't like Daniel LaRusso and why he perceived him as the bad guy the whole time, I'm like, that makes some sense.
Yeah, I think they lifted that like straight out of How I Met Your Mother, because the actor who plays Johnny, like there's this whole thing about Neil Patrick Harris's character and How I Met Your Mother is always like, Johnny's the villain, or Johnny's the hero of the Karate Kid, and Daniel LaRusso's the villain. And like he goes through this whole thing, and then they have the actor come on there, and he's like best friends with Barney, Neil Patrick Harris's character. But like that show to me is, and maybe it existed online probably before this, but like that show is what really galvanized the whole idea that like, no, Daniel's really the villain and Johnny's the poor victim of the original film.
And like, I think, so before I say this, I think Daniel's a well-written character, but he is very upper class in the show, and there's times I'm so irritated with him. I'm like, you rich asshole. Like one of the things that he does to get back at Johnny at one point is he talks the person that like owns the strip mall that Cobra Kai's a part of is to like upping the rent, like doubling it or something. And it's like that, you rich boy. I have other words I want to say, but
yeah, that's one of the fun things that the show does is like it takes Daniel and makes him this flawed character where he was like this sort of, you know, this flawless hero in the original films, right? Like, and they just let him be perfect. And in this, they're like, well, no, he's flawed just like anyone else. And it makes him a more interesting character within the show, right? So, yeah, that's a cool show. Like, people who haven't watched Cobra Kai should definitely watch Cobra Kai. It's so much better than you think it ever could be.
And, like, the fight scenes are, like, seriously good, too.
Yeah, they do a good job with those. And the young cast is good.
Oh, yeah.
Like, they've got a bunch of good young actors. The one guy is going to be the new Blue Beetle film that's coming out this year. So
I forgot he was from Cobra Kai.
All right, OJ.
So I'm doing pretty good. I've been watching a lot of TV and movies that I haven't been able to catch up on lately. And now I just added Cobra Kai on my list because I heard people talk about how good it was, but I always forgot about it. But in today's Buffy cast, so I did decide,
have you changed your opinion about Dawn?
No, I do not. But I think I said this before, but I bought season 8, the comics, and season 9, and a few of the other ones that I'm going to go through and read, but I did decide to watch Angel this time after we talked about it. And so it's the first time in a very long time that I've seen Angel, and a lot of stuff still seems kind of new to me. I just finished season 2. And so I think it's pretty good. Better than I thought before, and Angel is becoming a better character to me now. So I'm sorry, David Boreanaz, that I judge you so harshly because of Angel.
He's not that interesting of a character on Buffy.
Yeah.
Like, Angel really does make him a more interesting character.
You guys, he felt so good for a moment, and then Justin just drove the stake right back into him.
No. Like, I'm saying the same thing that he's saying, that Angel makes him into a really good character.
Yeah.
I mean, he does the same thing with Cordelia, right?
Yeah.
Makes her into a really interesting character.
And I think it's so funny because there's been a couple episodes where he could be in the sun now, and he just gets so giddy as a character when can be in the sun or when he saw his reflection in the mirror. So I think it was just I'm really enjoying that too. But yeah, so I'm enjoying it a lot more than when the first time I saw it, way back when, and that's good. And I started teaching a summer course, so I'm teaching 2 this summer. I teach 1 through June and then 1 through July. And this is communication across cultures. It's one of my favorite classes to teach. And I have a lot different demographic than I usually have teaching the class. And so it's a really, really diverse group. Normally it's a lot of, because it's a class that anyone in the university can take, it covers a core curriculum credit that people have to take for multicultural. And I'll generally get a lot of people from a lot of it's generally a lot of white people and they're U.S. Americans. But I have a majority of international students, a majority of students of color, a majority of women students. And so I'm having to change how I teach it a little bit because I'm teaching more about stuff that a lot of these people are experiencing firsthand other than teaching people about what other people are experiencing firsthand. So I think it's challenging me a little bit and I'm really, really enjoying it.
Yeah, because it gets really weird if you, as an American white man, are trying to explain to them, this is what your experience is like.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think there's a black African woman in the class, and so I'm telling her black women are experiencing all this, but she didn't necessarily experience that before she came to the U.S., right?
I'll say it's a very different experience being African compared to being African American.
Yes. And so I'm having to think and rephrase things a little bit as I'm teaching, and I really like being challenged like that. So it's pretty good. I'm hoping I'm giving them a good experience in the class. I guess we'll see. But
no, I think if you're self-aware of that and able to shift and everything, and that's a very positive sign, right? Like the negative would be if you were like, I'm just teaching it the same way I always do.
Yeah.
And not taking note of who's in the classroom.
Yeah, and the first few days were a little rough, but I got a lot of laughs today, and not at me, but at jokes. So I felt a lot better today than I have, and so that's how I know that I think people are really getting it, and so I'm doing a good job with it. So I'm hoping the laughs continue because there's nothing worse than teaching a class and everyone sitting there and just staring at you.
Yeah,
fact.
Blank stares is about the worst thing you can get in the classroom.
Yeah.
I think the only thing worse is just empty Zoom screens. That's the only thing worse than blank stares.
Yeah, teaching via Zoom is not fun. That's what I always thought was like crazy when people were saying, "Oh, these teachers, they like teaching online. It's so much easier for them." And
for who?
And I was
who
like,
said?
Like every teacher I know was just miserable teaching via Zoom.
Yeah.
So, you heard a lot of this like kind of rhetoric when people were saying, I guess it was a lot of conservative rhetoric about this is what they want to turn our education into, and they want to get rid of, school for our kids and everything, and they're ruining school, and we've got to get our kids back in school. And
literally every teacher, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. So speaking of TV, last night, I don't know how I got onto this. I'm trying to remember now how I even got into wanting to watch this. But I watched the final episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation, which I've seen before at least a couple of times. And I don't know why last night I watched it, but something I was reading just got me into a kick where I was like, I should go back. I should watch that. I can watch that right now, I bet. I can pull this up on my iPad and watch it right this second, which I did. And, I really like watching series finales because I always think it's really interesting. Like, television shows are, to me, much more interesting than movies in that regard because you spend so much time. So, like, even a sitcom, right? You spend 10 years with the characters of a sitcom, and then that show ends. How do you wrap that up? How do you give some sort of closure to the audience? And some shows are fantastic at doing that, and some shows are terrible at doing it.
Game of Thrones. Excuse me.
Sure, yes. One of the most infamous examples.
Oh my gosh.
But so I was watching Star Trek: The Next Generation because it is generally widely considered to be one of the best television finales ever made. And it doesn't have quite the twist of a Newhart, let's say, but it is like this great finale episode. And I was watching it and I was just thinking, like, yes, this is great, but also, like, we don't make television like this anymore. And, this past spring, they had the 3rd season of Picard, which is the sequel series to this. And it's just so much more subdued and so much like, okay, we're just going to sit around and talk. And that's going to be the entire focus of the episode. And we're going to have scenes where characters are just talking to one another. We're going to have Beverly Crusher chew out Captain Picard because he doesn't respect her on her bridge in the future. And you're like, okay, that's actually like a really cool scene. And it's a cool dynamic because we've lived with these characters for 7 years. And now and we know there's this like romantic tension and we're kind of flipping it where she's the one in charge now. And that's really cool. And it's cool writing and it's earned and it pays off. And it feels like this great finale and closure to these characters. And it's just really weird how we don't do that with television shows anymore. We don't allow characters to just like have these conversations and to allow the like actual character dynamics to play out. Like it's okay, we have to have an action scene here. Like we have to have these two characters come to blows with one another. Nobody hits each other in this episode. And that's the sort of thing like I feel like if you were doing it now and seeing modern Star Trek, that's exactly what they do, right? Like, well, okay, we'll just have a ship come in. There'll be a big shootout and everything. And there is like a shootout with some Klingons in this, but it's like this very brief little scene and it's between like 3 ships and not like an armada of hundreds or thousands of ships. And, it's certainly a commentary on Star Trek and where it is today, but to me, it's a commentary on where all of television is today, that we just don't make shows like this anymore. And to me, that's what's interesting about television is that it can be more character-driven than films where you only have 2 hours, right? Like you can't develop deep, like large cast of characters in a 2-hour film. But you can do that in a television show over multiple seasons. And that's the difference and that's the value of it. So every time I watch a TV show now and it's like, okay, we're going to have movie-sized big action scenes. I'm like, well, that's kind of cool, but like what's really cool in a TV show, and, I think Buffy and Angel are good examples of this. Nobody watched those shows for the fight scenes. The fight scenes aren't that great. Like you watch it because they actually developed those characters to the point where you began to care about them. And, Angel as a spinoff is a really good example. You really start to care about Angel and Cordelia, which were characters in the original show you sort of cared about, but they were kind of periphery characters. They weren't the main characters of the show. So, yeah, anyways, kind of a rant off topic there. But
well, no, and I think some really, really good examples of this have been being made now, like recently. And I hate to say 2 weeks in a row I'm talking well about Apple, right? But so Apple TV, they have some shows that are really fantastically character-driven where I'm really caring about the characters. Like Ted Lasso is amazing. There's, I can't remember what, Talking or Counseling or something. I can't remember what the show was.
Yeah, I think, is it Talking? You're talking about the one with Harrison Ford and Jason Segel?
Yeah, I'll remember it later.
They play therapists in the show.
Yeah. Shrinking? No.
I know what show you're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is something like this. Talking, Shrinking, something like that.
And then we just recently started watching the Silo.
Yeah.
Which is...
That's the name of it.
Amazing, by the way. I'm actually paying for Apple TV now, and rather than just getting like a 6-month trial and watching everything and waiting until the next seasons come out. And Yellow Jackets, too, is... Yellow Jackets isn't on Apple TV, but it's on... Showtime, yeah. It's an amazing, amazing show, and there's a new season out.
I've been told to take a look at Yellow Jackets.
It's fabulous. It's amazing. It's some of the best TV I've seen.
This is really interesting too, because like I'm thinking about, with my family, we a lot of, because we like to binge shows, and a lot of what we've been doing over the past several years has been going back and binging older shows. Like, God, now I can't remember. Was Newhart first or the Bob Newhart show?
Newhart was first, I think.
Okay, yeah. So, like, we went back and binged those. And, like, I need to get back to, because during undergrad, I watched, like, the first 5 seasons of Frasier. And then something happened and I fell off of it. But, like, I want to go back to that. And like you said, there's just that character-driven aspect where, you know, don't get me wrong, I love, you know, early seasons of Arrow. You know, season 2 of Arrow was probably the best out of the entire Arrowverse. But yeah, it's very different in how it's character-driven versus being scene-driven. I think driven by those specific, like, okay, we've got to have the build-up to the big fight scene rather than being, okay, well, what are the relationships between these characters?
Yeah, and I think, OJ, you're right. There are exceptions, right? And Yellow Jackets is a really good example of that. And any show that stars Melanie Linsky, like, gets my, like, thumbs up of approval.
100%.
Like, she can do just about anything, and it's amazing. But, yeah, I think it, you know, like, I just think my thing is those shows used to be on just, like, regular television. They weren't premium shows.
Fair.
So, like, the shows you're talking about are all, like, HBO caliber shows.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, I think Apple right now is the most like what HBO used to be, right? Like, they're doing these really premium series.
Yeah.
And they're not doing a ton of them, but, like, the ones they're doing. By the way, I looked it up. The Jason Segel show is called Shrinking.
Shrinking, okay.
But you just don't see that on, like, regular television as much. I feel like, and you know, it just stuck out to me that you know, Star Trek did that exceptionally well and, like, paid off those relationships in a way that mattered. But anyways, we're here to talk about video games, if you can believe it. We're not here to talk about Star Trek and Buffy and everything else, though.
Cobra Kai!
Cobra Kai.
I was like, let's be honest, when you put a group of nerds together, we're going to talk about all the nerdy things.
Yeah, there's like an hour of pre-roll before this podcast begins. That would just really, we should have like 2 or 3 podcasts and we could just record them one after another, as long as we could stay on topic.
That's the tricky part.
But yeah, let's talk about what you've been playing. Alicia, have you been playing anything?
Okay, I have no clue what the heck is going on in Earthbound, and I'm hooked. So I'm to the point now, I just recently got the 4th member of your crew, which Ness is the only one who I knew the official name for beforehand, so he's the only one I gave the official name to. So forgive me if I slip into my names for them instead of their official names. But I just got the Prince of Dalam and beat, I think, the 4th, is it the 4th Guardian to get that Soundstone piece after him? And so I'm like, I go through the game and I'm like, okay, yeah, like, this makes sense. And then I'm using a walkthrough online for some parts because I get lost on how to do things. And then, like, when you're in Summers, you get a call from Jeff's friend, and he's like, oh yeah, we're doing a survey of the players. I need your name, player. And I'm like, what? What? Yeah. Am I about to get doxxed right now? Like,
from a game from 1991.
Yeah. It's like, it's
early
so funny.
doxing.
It's so interesting because, like, you know, coming at this in 2023, you know, being someone, part of what got me started on Earthbound is OJ's constant recommendation. Part of it is, you know, knowing how huge of an influence it was for Toby Fox with Undertale and Deltarune. And so, like, there are little things that I know because of Undertale and Deltarune. Like, I know I'm waiting for Dr. Andonuts to be the bad guy because I know about the Earthbound Halloween hack and the ridiculous amount of F-bombs that Toby Fox put in that fight. And, like, the little details that are coming up and surprising me, like when they call for help but no one came. I'm like, oh, I see what Toby Fox did there, referencing that. But then you get moments like this where I'm like, okay, Undertale narrator talks to the character or talks to the player all the time, and now suddenly this has talking to the player. Hang on, I'm confused. What's happening? So like I said, before going into this, my full knowledge of Earthbound was anything I've picked up from Super Smash Brothers and OJ's recommendations without spoilers and what I've picked up from being a Toby Fox fan. And so I'm completely blind on this. I have no clue what's happening, and I'm having a blast.
I'm so excited that you're playing it. I'm so excited. So here's the thing about using the walkthrough, though, is that when it first came to the U.S., it had a gigantic it was $70, but it came with a strategy guide. You had to buy the strategy guide with the game.
Yeah.
Because it's a little complex.
I know. I'm like, I miss having, like, we have a strategy guide for Final Fantasy VII for both of the first two Kingdom Hearts games. I'm like, I miss when games did that.
Yeah.
It's also worth noting that the reason they did that was that role-playing games weren't really a thing in the U.S. Like, games had been out before, like the first Final Fantasy and I guess Final Fantasy 4/2 had been released prior to this one.
Yeah.
But, like, they weren't a popular genre like we think of them today.
Yeah.
So they really, Nintendo, since they were putting this out first party, they really thought that a lot of players, this might be their first time playing a role-playing game. And so
like,
they would be completely lost about it.
And, like, I definitely had, like, when I first was like, I have no clue what I'm doing, I need to pull up a walkthrough, I definitely had, like, a little bit of imposter syndrome of, like, I should be able to figure this out. Like, this game is from 1991. I can't figure this out, seriously. And then I was like, oh, yeah, they used to publish, like, full strategy guides that, you know, told you how to find all the little tricks and told you how to, you know, again, I'm thinking of Final Fantasy VII, told you how to make sure you got Vincent and Yuffie and all that. So I was like, I don't need to have imposter syndrome about this. I can look up the IGN guide.
I mean, I'm thinking back to the King's Quest games, and a lot of adventure games used to come with little hint books. Because if you go back and you play those games now, you'll be like, how did anyone ever figure this out? And they figured it out because they had a little hint book that went along with it.
Yeah, I'm like, I could go pay $90 to the hint guy to tell me what to do, or I could pull up IGN.
Yeah. So the thing that you're missing, though, that you can't get from the original experience is that it also came with scratch and sniff stuff.
You're right, I can't get that.
Yeah. But look it up and see what the scents were.
Just
so
promise me there wasn't one for Stinky Ghost, because I've just dealt with so many Stinky Ghosts right now. There was.
Some of them were not pleasant.
Oh, man.
It was the Harry Potter
Birdie Bot's
jelly
every
beans.
favorite beans.
Yeah, before them. So that's cool. That's cool that you're playing that. Anything else?
That's been the big one. I mean, literally, you walked out. I was the first one here because I grabbed lunch beforehand, so I was early, and I was literally sitting on the floor outside the podcast room playing Earthbound when Justin got here. So, like, I am completely hooked. My cat Wesley is less so. I don't think he enjoys the the pitch of the music, but he'll live.
Or probably you just ignoring him. Like anything that takes your attention away.
Oh, no, I'm very careful. I only get to play when he's napping. But
see, that's when my cat wakes up, though. So as soon as I start playing, it's like, wait a minute.
Oh, my God.
You're not appreciating my existence.
It was so funny.
I just assumed you stared at me while I slept.
There was one day he was sleeping up on his cat tree, and so I was sitting on the bed playing, and he opened his eyes, and the look he gave me was just... You sometimes when you have pets, you know, they look at you and you can just read their mind. And the look he gave me was just like, I hate that thing in your hands right now. Like, you're on your cat tree. It's not my fault you're not cuddling.
That's great. All right, Ryan.
So I had a bit of a nostalgia kick recently, and I started playing Pokemon Stadium since that's now on the... I enjoyed the nostalgia kick. I don't think it holds up as good, though, now.
That's fair.
I felt bad because I was like, I'm going to be honest about this. And then I saw you get excited. I'm like, oh. No,
I'm excited for the nostalgia, to be fair.
Yeah, no, it was really cool to bring up. Like just the little like video that happens before, like as it's like, you know, the camera's moving past like the lines of Pokemon, the Pokemon Stadium music coming on. And then like, you know, when it goes to like the menu screen and like how neat it looked. And how that just very much was a look of its time. You don't see stuff like menu screens like that in games anymore. Like, I mean, that's with any generation, but like, it did bring me like right back to that. But it also like left me feeling sad in ways because like you still have the Game Boy Tower, which one of my favorite things about that was that I could just pop in, you know, my Pokemon Red game when I was playing it when I was a kid, and then like play it on the big screen TV. And then I could even like look at my Pokemon. Like they had a way to like bring your Pokemon into Pokemon Stadium, and you could look at them like with a camera mode and stuff. And you know, like and like your Pokemon might have like slightly different colorations than the ones that are just like, you know, rentable within the game. Because you know you can rent Pokemon within the game and play Stadium that way, but you can also bring in your own Pokemon. And back then, like, you know, I noticed like, ooh, my Charizard's redder than the ones that, you know, I could play otherwise. And just that way, that interactivity felt so cool at the time as a kid. And just playing it now, I'm like, oh, I can't do that now though. Like, and it kind of makes me wish that they do something with like the emulation to where you could go to that and then you could just play Pokemon Red on there. Like, emulate those games within your emulation of Pokemon Stadium. That would be so cool.
Or if they could like hook it up to Pokemon Home somehow, where you could.
Oh, yeah, that'd also be really cool. But, like, it reminded me of how much I loved it then, but then I was playing it now. It was kind of like, it wasn't bad. It wasn't, like, as exciting back then. And I think part of it, though, is, like, that lack of, like, being able to interact with my Game Boy with it. But, like, just as my way of playing through a little bit of it, they have, like, the leader castle, the gym leader castle or something, so I went and played it. And I'm ashamed to say it took me a couple tries to beat Brock. Like, because I wasn't thinking much about my team, I just got Pokemon I kind of liked. And I was like, oh crap, this didn't work out well. Like, I got past, like, the first three guys, but as soon as I got back to Brock, I got killed. And that happened a couple times, and then finally I'm like, all right, I'm going to select a team that actually is going to work for this. And then I did fine. But, and then just to, like, play a little bit more of it, I played the Pokemon mini games, which, remember having fun when I played those when I was a kid? Not as much now, but they didn't quite hold up as well. But I did kind of, you know, appreciate that, like, they added that, like, back in the day. Like, they did think about that, and they added, it's like, in case you want to play something a little different, take a break from the actual battles, here's this. But yeah, it was a nice nostalgia trip. I think it could be more fun again if I could actually like import Pokemon into that I've trained and stuff in it. But you know, that being said, I still had fun with, you know, just kind of revisiting it. Pokemon Stadium in 64 emulated on the Switch.
Did you get a Doduo or Dodrio and make them use Fly?
I did not.
Okay, you have to do that before you stop playing it.
Yeah, I will.
Because it is the best fly animation you've ever seen.
I will do that.
Yeah, you talking about having the games interact with one another, the emulated games. That was an issue I know when they put out the Metroid Prime Remastered, because Metroid, what is the name of it? The Game Boy Advance one. Fusion, yeah. Originally, that and Metroid Prime were released on the same day. And they worked together. So, like, you could unlock the Fusion suit in Metroid Prime if you played both of those and you connected them together and everything. And so people were like, oh, well, you're putting this out and you're going to have Metroid Fusion emulate it here on the Switch. So maybe that'll work together, and it does not. And so, you know, the same thing with obviously the Pokemon games. Like, if you're going to be putting all this stuff out there, can you not have them work together? And like, I get that that's some additional like coding work to be done, but it seems like that would go a long way to endearing fans. Right?
Yeah. And I think, like, in certain instances like that, Pokemon Stadium loses so much of what made it so cool. Like,
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Anything else? That been mostly it?
Also, like, I was just really sad by how weak Charizard's moveset was, that's all. Like,
Nintendo hadn't realized yet that Charizard was actually their favorite, not Pikachu.
All right. Well, OJ, how about you? What have you been playing?
So I've mostly just been playing Tears of the Kingdom. Still really enjoying it, but I am frustrated, which is part of the enjoyment of the game, I guess. But, well, I'm not going to say enjoyment of the game, but it's part of the game is a frustration. So here, my controller, my Switch is a first generation Switch, and my controllers are still first generation controllers.
Do they need updates?
I would, yes, they do.
I got you.
Thank you, I appreciate you.
We don't even have to make the joke anymore. She just does it for us.
But so here's the problem with that: is the first generation Joy-Cons didn't have a really good antenna on them. So when I'm trying to play on the TV, I'm a little bit too far away, and it drifts a little bit when I'm playing. And so I like to play on the TV sometimes, and sometimes I'll play on the Switch itself. Plus, they're just old, and I do need to replace them. And so that's really frustrating me because there's a lot of like stuff with the arrows. Like there's a mini game where you play and you have to shoot things with the arrow. There's a couple things where you have to be pretty good with your aiming, and it's screwing it up when I'm trying to play it. So that's on my end. That's not on the game's end really by itself. Right. And then so I've been through the second essentially boss that is recommended in the way that you go through the game. Because you can do them in any order, but I'm just following what they say. Hey, maybe you should go here next. Really, really loved it. That was the area with them is mostly I don't think this is going to be too big of a spoiler, so I apologize. You know this pretty early in the game, but there's temples. There's different temples like in previous games, right? And then so the fire temple is the second one that I went through, and it was mostly puzzle based. There wasn't really that much fighting or anything, and I really, really loved that because like fighting games is great. It's fine, but I really enjoy the puzzles so much more. So the temple was much more a puzzle. Really enjoyed it. It took a little bit of thinking and a little bit of working with stuff to make sure it happened. Really, really loved it.
Yeah, and that was always part of the appeal of the Zelda games were the puzzles, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the combat's part of the appeal, to be fair, but the puzzles, particularly in the dungeons or temples or whatever they're called, is really part of the appeal.
There's a reason that one of the iconic Zelda sounds is the, hey, you solved the puzzle.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so I agree with you, by the way. I really like that. And I think that they have solved one of the big problems that a lot of people had with Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
Right. People were kind of disappointed by the lack of more traditional style dungeons.
Right. It's so much better. The bosses are so much better because Breath of the Wild, I was not a fan of the different Calamity Ganons in the beasts, and it took me like 2 or 3 days to beat them each time. And like I enjoy having a challenge. I don't enjoy it just being kind of like a cheap challenge where you have to do everything exactly right or you fail. And that's how Breath of the Wild was. With this, I was able to move around. I was able to get hit a few times. I was able to do stuff my own way. With the first and second boss, and so they're both really fantastic. I appreciate how they're bringing in other characters, and appreciating how that feels more like Zelda too. And rather than just like, oh, you unlocked all these powers, now use these powers in different ways. In this one, you're unlocking specific things that help against the boss that you're fighting, right? So. It's not just like you have all this power and you're just getting stronger. It's like you're unlocking these very specific things that help you. And so it really feels like much more of a return to Zelda with that. And it's just so fantastic.
All right, cool. Is that it?
Yeah, that's all I've been playing.
Okay. So I'm still playing Zelda as well, but I did try to play a couple of new things because they just released demos this week. So these are demos, not the full games. I did play some Final Fantasy XVI, and I did not complete this demo because it is apparently a fairly significant portion of the beginning of the game. And it is, oh my goodness, it is, all right, start the game, set and watch a movie, move your character forward a few steps, watch a movie, move your character forward a few steps, watch a movie. And then eventually it does a flashback and it teaches you the combat in the game. And I will say that the combat is pretty cool. But it is, definitely much more of a Bayonetta style action game than it is anything that you normally associate with Final Fantasy. And so it's fun, and I think the story is potentially compelling. It's very Game of Thrones. It is very much, we're going to have this meeting where we yell at each other, and then these two characters are going to go out in the hall and literally have sex in the hallway. Up against the wall, so.
Alrighty then.
They're really taking that fantasy part of Final Fantasy to the next level.
It is very much like this is somebody's kink, this game. And we are going to fulfill all of those before this. Because it is a small woman and a giant man.
Oh, okay.
Not a big man, a giant man. And so, there's some weird things going on in this game.
So did they just somebody write fan fiction for this? You know what? This could just be your next Final Fantasy game. This Game of Thrones fan fiction, Final Fantasy. Yeah, same thing.
It is Game of Thrones fan fiction, really, is what's going on. This is people watch Game of Thrones, really liked Game of Thrones. We're like, what if we made a video game of Game of Thrones? We don't have the license. Screw it. We have Chocobos. Let's do it.
A giant chocobo claw reaches down from the sky and grabs one of Daenerys' dragons and crushes it.
So having said all that, which sounds very negative, this game looks amazing. This game looks next generation. Of any game, this is one of those games that you're going to show off to people. Why should you own a PlayStation 5? This is it. Visually speaking, this is a game that sells a PlayStation 5. It looks unlike anything you've played before. And I don't want to oversell that because it's a lot of, again, movies and stuff, but it's just everything's so richly detailed. Everything, there's so much detail in the background. You're walking through the castle a little later and, there are people who have set up tents and stuff, and there's just little bespoke details, everywhere in the background and everything. It doesn't feel generic at any point when you're walking around. And even the opening when you're kind of running through a mountain and everything, if that was any other action game, you'd be like, okay, well, this kind of looks like, in some ways, this kind of looks like an Uncharted game. I'm sliding down the side of a hill and everything like I would in an Uncharted game, but it looks really, really good while you're doing it. And the big battles, which I think are rendered in engine, they're not pre-rendered. They look amazing and everything. There's a scene where you're fighting with some of the summons, so the big summon battles that they've advertised. And that looks amazing. You're flying through a cave and battling each other. So this looks like the $250 million Marvel movie, production value wise. It's all top tier and everything. What I have read about it is that it is very slow to get going, and that once you get past a certain point, you get more opened up gameplay, and then the game really shines when you get to that. I am not to that point yet, so I don't want to judge the game too harshly based on. I will say that watching all the Game of Thrones stuff, I was like, I don't care. I don't know who these characters are. This is not that interesting to me. Maybe it will get to that point. And I did read some people online who were like, oh, I love this story. I'm really into the story. That was not me. But I do think it has the potential to be a really amazing game. It's just very much a very different style Final Fantasy game. So Do not go into it expecting the Final Fantasy of old. They have turned the page. It's very clear they're never going back to those old style games. Not with the mainline series, at least, right? But it looks really good. And, it may be a game worth playing just because there's no other game that looks like this, right? I know a lot of people who went to see Avatar Way of Water, not because they really loved the first Avatar film, but they were like, hey, I'm never going to see a movie this big budget again in the theater. And, they spent $400 million making this movie. I want to see what a $400 million movie looks like. And that's kind of what this game is, what does I don't know how much they've spent on this, but, I would guess somewhere north of $150 million they've spent developing this game. So it's cool. And I'm compelled enough. I want to play more of it. So I will finish out that demo most likely.
It'll be even cooler, when you can get that DLC where you download Peter Dinklage and he becomes a character in your party.
It would be cool if they had got him to do a voice for one of the characters in this.
Or just have him play as hi, I'm Game of Thrones and TV's Peter Dinklage. Joining your party.
Well, they already have him for Destiny, so I guess they need something new for him.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm going to go through it this weekend. I wanted to have time to just sit and play it without having to break.
Yeah. And that's probably a better way because I don't feel like I got the full experience maybe. So the other game that I played, and again, this is a demo. This is a game called, I don't know how to pronounce this, Jusant?
That would be my guess. Jusant?
It's a French word, I know. So Jusant may be.
Jusant.
So anyways, this got shown off at the Xbox showcase, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But this is a climbing game. And it is very much a climbing game. You are not doing anything else so far of what I've played. It is just you climbing the side of a mountain, basically. And that doesn't sound all that interesting at first, particularly if you're sort of thinking of it as a Assassin's Creed or Uncharted way. But this is much more of an active climbing, so you are actually having to control your hands and where you're placing them and which sort of ledge are you grabbing onto, and then you are having to
do you have the proper equipment in case you fall?
You do. You actually have to place the what are they called, you have to place the sticks into the rock and everything, so that if you get far enough you're going to fall. But also when you do that, you can let out some of the rope and then use that to swing. So you're having to figure out, I'm going to place this here and then use it to swing over to this other part and grab hold of a ledge.
Okay.
So it ends up, again, it's very early. I'm pretty sure just the first part of the game, at the end of this, spoiler, you activate something and it lights up one of 5 lights around a bigger light. So I'm guessing maybe this is the first 6th of the game or something, but I don't really have a clue for how much of the game it is. And it's pretty fun. The thing I'll say is the way that you interact with the story, and there is a story going on in the background, is by reading pages of diaries. And I think even just something small like having voice acting for those would have really made this more engaging. As it is, I was reading them and I thought it was interesting enough because they're kind of explaining this entire culture where these people live on this mountain and how they have to build new pathways for them to get around from one area to the other. But I could see myself getting to a point in this game where I just don't care anymore about the story and okay, I just want to climb to the next area. I just don't want to read this. So I think a way of making that more engaging would have made it more interesting for me. It does have the problem. It does telegraph generally fairly well. And so if you look on the walls, there will be scrapes on the wall where somebody has swung. And so it's a sign for you oh, look, this is where somebody's feet have been running along the side of the mountain here. So you need to swing at this point as sort of a tip off. But it has that same problem that any sort of climbing game does, which is, okay, where do I go next? And this game...
it ain't about how fast you get there. It ain't about what's waiting on the other side. It's the climb.
Yes, thank you, Miley. So, I think it could run into that problem of just getting to a point where you get frustrated enough because, like, where do I go next? What am I supposed to do next? It's fairly linear so far, as like there is a certain path you are to follow and go through this. But I think it could be really interesting as it opens up more and everything. There seems to be something more fantastical going on by the end of the demo. So like maybe it gets much more interesting and everything. That is coming to Game Pass, I'm pretty sure. So I'll probably play through it. Even if I skip all the story sections, I'll probably end up playing through that game because I did enjoy what I played so far. All right, well, let's jump right into the news. And there's a lot of news. So we had 3 more big game showcases and some smaller showcases as well. We're going to hit the big ones and try to pick up some of the smaller news and everything. So the big thing was the Xbox showcase. And as we talked about the other day on the last episode, Xbox really needed a good showing out of this. And I think it really sort of depends on who you ask, whether they had that good showing or not.
Yeah.
So they started off the big reveal of the first we've seen anything of their new Fable reboot. And this didn't show any specific gameplay. I mean, I think some people thought maybe the parts where it showed your little character running from the giant Richard Iode might have been gameplay. I don't think it is. I think that's pre-rendered.
Yeah.
But it certainly set the tone for the game of having this like quirky British humor and everything. The original Fable games had that, but this is a different style of sort of quirky British humor. So it did a good job with that. I think it's the game that I saw at that show that was maybe most exciting for me. Like if they're going to like really try and nail that humor and everything with this role-playing adventure game, that could be really exciting. I don't know how anybody else felt about that trailer or saw that trailer.
So I'm excited if they can capture what they had in this trailer in the game. But again, I didn't see gameplay footage, so I don't know if it's going to be like that or if there's just going to be a quirky movie here or there that deals with it.
Yeah, so that's a recurring problem with the Xbox Showcase.
Yes.
Lots of pretty CG trailers, not a whole lot of gameplay.
Yep.
So they also showed off Cyberpunk 2077. They had a wild Keanu appear as part of the show. So they showed off the expansion called Phantom Liberty. This is the one that Idris Elba is going to also be in, along with Keanu. And I think the most interesting part of this is that what actually came out after the show, which is that people said this basically is an overhaul of the entire game. Yes, it's DLC, it's additional story content, but they're going back and reworking all sorts of different systems in the game. So this seems to be like the 2.0 version of that game that, if you remember, launched very broken and not quite the game that people wanted it to be.
Not quite the game people wanted it to be. It's a very
the game
diplomatic,
they promised as DLC.
very diplomatic way to put that.
Yeah, so people who were kind of talking to them at the show and everything as part of Summer Game Fest sounded very excited based on a lot of the stuff that they revealed for this. I still haven't played Cyberpunk 2077. Like it launching broken just made me say I'll play it eventually someday.
Yep.
That someday hasn't come. Maybe this will be what finally convinces me.
See, if you don't get a Heimdall costume for Idris Elba or you don't get a dog for Keanu, like is there a point?
Right. Yeah, if this is gonna finally be the game they promised, then I'll buy it. But otherwise, but I'm still gonna wait for other people to play it and say, I'm not gonna buy this as soon as the DLC comes out.
Yeah, I think this is a really good example of a company hurting their image. Yeah. CD Projekt Red had this very esteemed image. They were viewed as one of the top 5 developers in games, and this game has really tarnished that image quite a bit for a lot of people, I think. And so maybe this is their redemption. I hope so, but I'm sort of like you, OJ. I'm not holding my breath.
Yeah.
They showed off Avowed. So they actually did show off gameplay for Avowed. What I guess I assume was gameplay of Avowed. So Avowed is it's a new role-playing game. The thing I'll say, based on what they showed, is I don't know what the hook for this game is. It's sort of, watching it looked like, okay, well, this is another sort of, Elder Scrolls clone. And nothing about it particularly stood out to me. That doesn't make it bad. It looked nice and everything, but like nothing about it particularly stuck out to me. So, hopefully they can sell what that game is better as we go forward. They announced a new Xbox Series S in black with a 1 terabyte hard drive. That's cool, I guess, because that is the digital only system, so you can't play discs, so you need a big hard drive in there.
As a non-Xbox person, what color was the Series S and Series X beforehand, if it's a big deal that this one's black?
So the S was white, and the X...
Okay.
Excuse me, the X was black.
Okay. So I'm like, I just picture the 360. I'm like, wasn't it always?
Well, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I don't care what color consoles are.
I just think surely the fact that it was noted.
Yeah.
That I was like, wait, what?
It's got to be polka dot or no deal.
Well, I mean, they made a big deal in the little teaser that they showed. They were like, oh, it's back in black. They didn't get the rights to the song.
I'll say,
but,
if you don't play the song, you can't say that.
Right. But there are people who I know who will not buy a console unless it's in black. They refuse. And I just don't care because it goes under my TV and I never look at it for the most part. But there are people that matters something to. I think the bigger deal is the terabyte hard drive.
Yeah.
But they are raising the price by $50. So they're not replacing the 500 gig system. They're adding this into the mix, which to me seems like a problem. Like, if you're going to do this, just replace that one.
Yeah.
Put out this 1 terabyte system.
Yeah. And I'm considering it because I haven't had an Xbox since the 360. But with Game Pass and a couple of the games I really liked that I saw here. And there's a couple games that I just haven't played yet that I can play on Game Pass. So, like, I was looking at this and I was like, a terabyte is a good size where I can get a lot of games and don't have to worry too much about it.
Yeah, I think this is a good option. This is a better option than the original S because of the 1 terabyte hard drive. Yeah. I think with Game Pass, where you're downloading all the games digitally anyway, then it doesn't matter that there's no disk drive. Yeah. So I think there is a market for this. I just still think they should have put this out at $300 instead of $350. Yeah. They showed off Starfield. So they showed off a brief trailer as part of their main show, and then after the show, they had an additional 30-minute show just focused on Starfield. Starfield looks amazing. Starfield is from Bethesda, so this is the Skyrim people. This is their new game. They're finally making a new game. It is Starfield. It is a space exploration game. They refer to it as NASA punk. Because they said we want it to look like this is all could actually be built, right? Like, this is not fantastical fantasy stuff like out of Star Wars. This
is
like
hard science fiction.
Yeah, to some degree. Like where would we go if we, where do we think we realistically could be, say, 100 years from now, right? Like building space-faring ships and everything. And so it has that sort of slightly grounded look to it. This game looks like No Man's Sky meets Skyrim. And I think maybe that's the best way to explain it, meets Halo. Maybe that's the best way to explain the game if you haven't watched it and everything. So they said there's going to be 1,000 planets. Not all of those will have stuff on it, but some of them will. They'll have different bases and installations. They showed character customization, so you can make your character super strong, so you can walk up and punch somebody to kill them instead of using a weapon, or you can upgrade a jetpack so you can fly over them and shoot them from above. So there were different ways to like kind of approach elements based on how you want to customize your character. You can build your own starship and then you staff it with a crew. And you know, it looks like a pretty cool game. If that game is what they say it's going to be. I mean, I think we sort of know what that game is going to be. It's going to be Skyrim in space.
Yeah. Yep.
I think the big question is, okay, is there interesting stuff to do going between different planets, right? Or am I really going between like 10 planets and there's another, 990 planets out there that I'm just mostly ignoring? And, how broken is this going to be? Bethesda games are always broken at launch. They build in all these like cool systems and everything. That's the fun of Skyrim. You can go anywhere. You can do anything. You can go whichever path. You can be sort of villainous, or you can be, the super altruistic good guy. That leads to lots of bugs, which have made a lot of people not like those games. I think what is interesting about this is how they're not going to get rid of all that, but how unbroken can this game launch?
Yeah.
And the scope of it makes it seem like that's going to be more difficult, right? But what they showed off looked really good. Looked really impressive. A whole lot of fun to, potentially play, and that is their big game for this year. They showed off a game called South of Midnight. This was another pre-rendered trailer. You played as a female character with a giant sort of skeleton man who had possums crawling around inside his pants and stuff, which is not as dirty as it sounds, and I don't know how that's possible.
Oh my god!
So I was actually really excited, even though it was a very small trailer. I looked at it; just looked amazing. It looked like something I want to play. As a young black woman with, it seems like some type of magical powers or superpowers or something. And like, I can't even really think of, I can't think of 5 black women I played in games over my entire life. And then having like a superhero or a magical black woman, like main character just is amazing to me. And then it looked amazing. The interaction between her and the skeleton. I thought it was a tree and not a skeleton, but I can see skeleton now too. And so I think that it was just amazing. I'm really excited for this game. I'm hoping that it's good because I don't know anything about the gameplay at all. I don't know what kind of game it is. But just this trailer made me excited.
Yeah, so there was the Square game that got released this year, PlayStation. Began with an F. What was that? But that featured a black female protagonist, right? Yep. That was the sort of kid in King Arthur's court, like sort of transporting you to this fantasy world. But yeah, that is something unique about it. It also had the sort of the trailer had a sort of Spider-Verse animation style to it, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it looked interesting. Just the style of it, right? Looked cool. I don't know what the game is.
Yeah.
Because they didn't even like hint at what kind of game it was. Is this a role-playing game? Is this an action game?
Yeah.
At the end, she does a little bit of magic. But I don't know what in what fashion that's going to be, right? But yeah, I mean, certainly it looked cool from the trailer and everything. Yeah. They showed off Forza Motorsport. This is the reboot of the Forza Motorsport franchise, so they're going back to no number for it. This is what you think it is. It's a racing game. Yeah. And, the cars look really realistic. The tires are really round. You can't see the polygons anymore, so I mean, that's cool. These games aren't made for me. I like the Forza Horizons games. Those are more arcadey. This is the more Sims focused franchise. So cool for the people that it's for. Did somebody die over there on the other side of the table?
No, I accidentally kicked the table front of the thing.
Let's see. They show off Clockwork Revolution. This is the game that looks like it's BioShock Infinite 2. It is not BioShock Infinite 2. But it's this sort of steampunk game where you are apparently traveling in time and changing the future by like what you do in the past. But it has that BioShock Infinite look. If you want it more of that sort of steampunk turn of the century look, this is definitely it.
Yeah, I got my eye on it. I don't know how it'll play, but I have my eye on it because it looks kind of cool.
I feel like that's the constant theme of this.
Yeah.
I don't know how it's gonna play, but it looks cool.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like we said, these are
Yeah.
pre-rendered trailers.
I'll
Like,
say if it's no almost no gameplay, it's all
Yeah.
CG. It's like
yeah, you're going off of style more than anything, right? They did show off a game called 33 Immortals. So this is played from an overhead perspective. You can play 33 player co-op, hence the name. This looked sort of like Diablo Battle Royale to me. So it looked like sort of Diablo, say, I guess 3, but like played from this overhead perspective, and you are playing with 32 other players at the same time. So you have
in the end there can be only one.
yes, they could not get the Highlander license, that very valuable license.
Yeah.
And so they had to come up with a different name, but like it showed like meteors coming down and like crashing, and the different characters all running across the screen trying to avoid this at the same time. It looked neat, and it looked like something different, right? And they actually showed off what looked like real gameplay.
Yeah.
So that's cool. That puts it above a lot of these other games just right there.
Yeah, at first when I saw it, I thought it was going to be kind of like a co-op Vampire Survivors because of the stuff going around people.
Sure.
Yeah, but then eventually I was like, oh, wait, no, this is a little more like Diablo. So, yeah, but I think it looks cool. I have my eye on it. It's something I might want to play.
They showed off Payday 3. This is something that we've known was coming. They announced a release date. I think the release date was for sometime in September. So we didn't have a release date previous to this. This is more Payday. This isn't the most flashy looking game, but I imagine that's because Payday 2 is wildly popular and still thousands of people playing it online every day. So they probably want to have the specifications for this game pretty low so it can run on just about anything. But it's another Payday game. It is you pulling off bank heist and different things with other players co-op online. They show off a remake of Persona 3 called Persona 3 Reload. If you like Persona, this is for you. Not my bag, but...
So here's the thing, is after I saw Persona 4, I wanted to play some of the earlier ones, and they're very hard to play. They're not difficult. They're just, it's hard to go back and play those. So
they're archaic.
There's something I may want to, like, this is something I may want to check out because I never played Persona 3 because it was on PS2, and it was just not fun to play, right?
I saw on Twitter someone was like, "We're always getting 3, 4, and 5. When will they come back to 1 and 2?"
That's what I was gonna say about 5, though. I was like, sorry, we're moving on to the next one.
No, go ahead.
Persona 5 Tactica. I don't need another Persona 5 game. Like, I'm not that big of a fan of Persona 5, any of them, really. So, like, just make Persona 6. It's okay. We'll see if we like that one.
It was Persona 4 you liked, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Persona 4 is actually, like, widely beloved.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the most loved of the franchise. And I think the reason we don't get Persona 1 and 2, my understanding is that when you go back to those games, the systems and the design of those games is so archaic compared to modern Persona games. So it would
And
be...
I think that's people were wanting them to go back and remake them.
Yeah.
Right.
Or, like, give them some love in any form.
Yeah.
I just think my understanding is that would be a larger undertaking of a remake versus 3, which is more kind of in line already, with the modern games with 4 and 5. But yeah, so OJ, you mentioned Persona 4 Tactica, which is a tactical strategy game using the Persona 5 world and characters. I mean, this is a very sort of Square move.
Yeah.
To me, like, we're going to make Final Fantasy 15 and then we're going to make like 6 spin-offs of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It feels, it's weird to think about each sequel is going to be an IP unto itself.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they're not doing more Persona games. They're not doing more Final Fantasy games. They're doing more Persona 5 games.
Yeah.
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 The Persona 5 extended universe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly it, right? And like Final Fantasy got into doing that with, like,
Seven.
10-2, and yeah,
7 has its own universe.
Yeah, and I guess it's been successful financially for Square, and so I can't blame Atlas for doing this with Persona, but yeah, I think the problem is if you have people who are fans of Persona and they play 5 and they're like, okay, well, that either I like that or I didn't like it, they may not want to go play 5 different spinoffs.
Right.
Though I imagine the main Persona team that's working on 6 is probably working on that. This is probably different teams that they're bringing in to make these games. Let's see. They showed off. So this looked pretty neat. They showed off Sea of Thieves, The Legend of Monkey Island. So this is another expansion to Sea of Thieves. This is free if you're already playing Sea of Thieves. But this is working in some of the Monkey Island. They showed off the island itself. They showed off Guybrush. They showed off the bar and everything. This seems like a very smart I guess like crossover to have here. You have Sea of Thieves, which is this multiplayer pirate game. What's the most famous pirate video game? Well, The Legend of, The Secret of Monkey Island. So this seems smart to bring that in there.
And they got the original voice actor for Guybrush. I thought that was pretty cool.
And I think it'll be interesting to see with that, just like, I haven't played much of Sea of Thieves. I played a little bit of it when it first launched, but I haven't played any of it since then. How big of an audience is that going to bring in to that game? This actually makes me want to go back and play it now, just because of the Monkey Island stuff. But, when it first launched, the problem was there just wasn't a whole lot to do in the game. So the fact that they've been working on this now for years, adding content, makes that more interesting for me to go back to. They announced, this was kind of a surprise, they start showing Microsoft Flight Simulator, and they started by just showing all these new things that you can do. So they had hot air balloons, and they had plane racing, and they had gliders, and they had you doing construction using helicopters and everything. And so they kept showing off all these new features they were adding, and it was like, this seems like an insane expansion to the Microsoft Flight Simulator. And then at the end, they're like, all right, it's Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. So it's a whole new game. This seems cool. For the people who are really into Flight Simulator, there's not a whole lot more to do graphically to upgrade that game. That game still looks amazing. So adding in all these different ways that you can interact with aircraft seemed really, really cool. There are people who are really into this. There are people who go out and buy the flight stick and the pedals and, everything else. And so I assume they are eating this up. And that's cool that Microsoft is making those sorts of games, these very niche games that fit for an audience. They show off some more of Hellblade 2's content. I don't know. This is either going to appeal to you or not, probably depending if you like the first Hellblade or not. That is a game very much about mental health. And so I think, it'll be interesting to see, can they continue that forward in this sequel and do interesting things with it that are also in good taste. They show off a trailer for Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. This is the new Like a Dragon game. Very cheeky trailer, straight out of, was it Austin Powers 2, where it begins with him nude and people keep moving things in front of him so you never see him. That's the way this trailer is.
So I wasn't interested in these games, but I thought that this trailer was really funny because he wakes up on a beach naked and he doesn't speak the language of everybody else, and he doesn't know why everyone's freaking out at him because they're all talking in English. And he doesn't. It appeared that he didn't speak English, and so he's trying to figure out what happened. And then everything is just slightly covering his junk until he realizes that he's naked. So,
Emperor's New Clothes moment.
Yeah,
yeah. So he's on a beach in Hawaii apparently. So that looks cool. A couple other games: Tireborn, Wakes the Deep. We didn't get a whole lot of either of those games. We did see quite a bit of gameplay of Dungeons of Hinterberg. This game looked pretty cool to me. It looked like a small kind of indie style game, but lots of different sort of interactions that showed you like kind of snowboarding at one point, riding a rail car at one point. So that looked pretty cool. And then Jusant, as we talked about earlier. So those were the main big announcements out of the Xbox showcase.
There's one that you missed here.
Oh, okay.
That I saw. And so the name is escaping me right now, but it's a joke version of or a satirical version of the game where your weapon talks.
Oh,
High on Life?
Yeah.
Yeah.
High on Life?
Yeah, High on Life, and it's what was it? High on something. I can't remember exactly what it was called. Sorry.
But they did announce DLC for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the DLC is apparently you're a sword who is a serial killer now, apparently. Let me find out what the name was, because the name was a pun.
High on Knife.
High on Knife, that's right, yeah. So, yeah, you're a serial killer knife in this DLC. And they said it's a tongue-in-cheek satirical DLC, so I thought... I'm not going to play the game, but I thought that was funny.
I am here for puns.
Yeah.
So overall, it's the games that were shown look kind of interesting, but the problem is there's not gameplay.
Yeah.
So what is Fable? Well, I sort of know based on the original Fable games. What is Avowed? Well, I think it's a Skyrim clone. What is South of Midnight? Well, it's a cool trailer and a cool visual style, but I don't know what that game actually is.
Yeah.
What is Clockwork Revolution? Well, it's not BioShock Infinite 2. That's about all that we know. So I think that's the big problem for Xbox, and most of these games were 2024. So 2024 sounds really exciting. 2023 is basically...
I'm bored.
What?
I'm bored.
Yeah, I mean, it's Starfield and it is, Forza. And so, I think the problem for Xbox is if they're trying to convince people to buy an Xbox today, I would have a hard time recommending somebody buy an Xbox today, right? And until Starfield comes out, maybe then, if that game is as amazing as it looks and everything. But it's sort of the situation where I'd be like, well, wait until after Christmas, and you can probably get one on sale at a really good deal. Because the games that you're really going to want to play are coming out in 2024 for the most part.
And also the ones that I'm really interested in are going to be on PC too. So I don't know if I don't know if it'd be worth it to get Xbox for this.
Right. If you don't have a gaming PC, maybe so. But if you have a gaming PC, all of Xbox's games come to PC now. So again, it's hard to justify the purchase of both. Let's see. So we also want to talk about the Ubisoft show. The biggest thing that came out of that was Star Wars Outlaws. They actually showed a trailer for this at the Xbox showcase, and then they actually showed gameplay of it at the Ubisoft Forward. So good on Ubisoft actually showing the game actually being played. This is a very sort of, you're playing as a female character, but it is very much the Han Solo game you always wanted. She is very much in the style of Han Solo, even doing the quick draw with her blaster, which is straight out of
She shot first.
Yeah, straight out of Han shot first. It looked pretty cool. As a Star Wars game, if you want to play a new Star Wars game, this looks like a really fun, exciting Star Wars game. Even showing you running around the city and fighting and everything, but then getting into your ship, flying into outer space, and then engaging in combat in outer space. This looks like a really fun, exciting game. They say that's coming next year. So again, another one to kind of look forward to. They show off some gameplay of Assassin's Creed Mirage. We talked about this last episode because they showed a little bit of it. This is the new Assassin's Creed game that is like the old Assassin's Creed games. So think Assassin's Creed 2 more than the more recent ones set in Egypt and everything. They announced that Skull and Bones is going to get a closed beta test this fall, and then theoretically someday will actually come out. I don't believe it.
Don't hold your breath.
They showed off Assassin's Creed Nexus VR, which is their Assassin's Creed VR game. This is the game that's going to get somebody killed. Because in the trailer for this game, they show people like jumping off of stuff and like leaping and like stabbing people and everything. And I'm just thinking, how do you replicate this in VR?
Yeah.
Right? Like the way that they're showing it is not going to be translate one-to-one to VR. And so it looks pretty cool when they're showing it. But
some dumb 12-year-old or some drunk, age unstated person is going to be like, watch this.
I mean, anybody who's played VR is dangerous.
Yeah.
Like, unless you have a...
Shoot, I almost tripped over a chair playing Beat Saber.
Yeah.
Like...
You have to have a big open space to play VR. And if any sort of thing where it has you jumping around and doing the sort of things you do in an Assassin's Creed game, it's hard to imagine how that's going to translate and be fun in any way. So I guess we'll see with that. I think people are going to end up with some broken bones. They showed off a new Netflix series called Captain Laserhawk, a Blood Dragon Remix. I have no idea what this show is. It is.
The name just makes me think of Silverhawks. And I'm like, I don't think it's that.
It is somehow based around the Far Cry Blood Dragon. Was it Far Cry 3 that had the Blood Dragon expansion? But it doesn't look anything like Far Cry, so I don't know what this game actually is. Let's see. They showed off Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. This is Far Cry with an Avatar paint job. So instead of normal bases and everything, you are playing as one of the Avatar characters. What are they?
The Navi?
Yeah, the Navi.
The blue skin people.
I'm surprised I remembered that.
I think I read something about this is an extension of the movies, too, and it counts as like canon and part of the movies.
Yeah, so I think it's taking place at the same time that the second film takes place. You're not playing as the film characters. And it looked really pretty. It looks an awful lot like a Far Cry game. You're freeing up bases and everything and, deciding if you're going in guns blazing or playing more stealthy and everything. You're playing it from a first-person perspective. It looks cool. I mean, but it's kind of hard to tell. It looks like if you hate the Far Cry games, this isn't probably going to win you over. But if you love those games, this looks like at least something slightly different with those games. And the thing that really stole the show for Ubisoft was Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. So I think, again, this was something that was shown off at the PlayStation show or maybe Summer Games Fest show. So we talked about this last episode. This is a 2D side-scrolling Prince of Persia game, but it is apparently a Metroidvania with like an open map that you're exploring. And the word from multiple people that were there and got to play the game is that this game is amazing and that it plays amazing and that what you saw in the extended gameplay that they showed at Ubisoft that they didn't show at Summer Games Fest show is just how quickly your character is moving around. So like you're fighting bosses, but like you're dodging and parrying those bosses super fast all the time. I think I originally said the trailer had segments that looked like they're out of Celeste or Super Meat Boy. Apparently that is just how the game plays.
Okay.
So think of a Metroidvania set in the Prince of Persia world that plays like Celeste or Super Meat Boy. And that seems to be what this game is. That looks really cool. Let's see. Last big show here to talk about real quick, and this one did not have much to show, was the Capcom showcase. They showed off some more footage of Dragon's Dogma 2. They showed off a little bit of Pragmata, which is a game, I guess, that had been previously announced. I don't remember this game being previously announced. But they showcased this and then at the end said, our apologies, this game is going to take longer to deliver than we planned. We're sorry.
Oh.
And it was like, who are you apologizing to?
Like that one person out there that was waiting.
Yeah, that one person who knows what Pragmata was before this. Ryan, I did think of you because they announced the Apollo Justice Ace Attorney trilogy.
That I'm looking forward to.
So this is the 4th, 5th, and 6th game in the Ace Attorney series. They're packaging those together. They're redoing the graphics and everything like they have previously done. So that's pretty cool to see that those games must be selling well. That they're putting out a whole new collection of those. They talked about Path of the Goddess and showed off some more footage of that, which seems to be a third-person action game set in medieval Japan, I guess, with some fantastical elements. So there were like gateways that were being opened up and closed and that sort of thing. And that was really like the big things that were shown off at the shows. Well, we didn't talk about every single thing. There's a ton more, DLC and different things that got announced. But those were the big announcements.
So one thing I wanted to say about Dragon's Dogma 4 is they talked about it a little more, and they said the world is going to be 4 times the size of Dragon's Dogma. Now, Dragon's Dogma was huge. There was a very, very large area, and the part that this worries me about is that fast travel was really difficult. Like, you had to buy one item that would break every time you do it, and there's only limited locations where you could do it. And then, so I'm playing Tears of the Kingdom now, and anytime you get a shrine, you can teleport there. I love that, and I'm used to that now. So, I'm hoping that they fix the fast travel a little bit more from Dragon's Dogma.
Yeah, it's the concern, I think, with a lot of games when they announce, this game is going to be a bigger world, is there going to be anything interesting to do in that world?
Yeah.
So they, Spider-Man, they've come out and said, well, the world in Spider-Man 2 is going to be twice as big as the original Spider-Man. Okay. Is there anything interesting to do?
Yeah.
Because it's really fun to swing through that city, but if there's nothing to do for large stretches of it, then...
Is it bigger just to add space, or is it actually bigger for plot reasons?
Yeah, most games I'd rather be denser than bigger.
Right.
Yeah.
Agreed.
More stuff to do in them.
Right. And they did answer a question that we had last week, too, about the bridge and the physics. So now you can choose to break the bridge to fight the enemy or not break it. Right. And there's a lot of physics in the game where you can choose to use the physics around to help with. So I think that's really interesting. I'm glad that it's like that and it's not just like a pre-recorded bridge break.
Right. Yeah, that sounds really cool. That was the coolest part of that original trailer.
Yeah.
To me, at least. I was like, if they're doing that, that's really cool.
Yeah.
All right. We do have a few other items that came out. Obviously, most of the video game industry was in Southern California and the LA area for all these different shows. So we do have some more news that has come out. Todd Howard has confirmed that The Elder Scrolls Skyrim has sold over 60 million copies. I think this is particularly interesting because it was just, I think on last week's show, we were talking about The Witcher 3 had sold over 50 million.
This feels very much like the snobby neighbor who comes in and is like, oh, well, you just got a 2023 car? Well, I got a 2024 car.
Yeah.
But, the thing that is really interesting to me about this is that it's only a 10 million copy difference there, right? Like, the difference is 50 and 60 million. Like, Skyrim, I feel like, first, it's been released and re-released like 10 times.
I would say, I remember people talking about Skyrim when I was in 6th grade.
Oh man, you're gonna make me feel old.
I know. But it's like you said, it's just been released and it's been out for so long and it's been re-released and dang.
And I feel like
and Witcher 3 is that close.
And I feel like it's the game at this point everyone owns a copy of.
Yeah.
Right? Like everyone owns a copy of that somewhere, and and it seems weird that The Witcher is that close. If you told me The Witcher was at 50 million copies and Skyrim was at 100 million copies, I'd believe you.
Yeah.
Right? But to think that they're that close, and I think, again, going back, that really says a lot about that television show.
Yeah.
How many copies of The Witcher 3 got moved because of the Netflix series? And I think that has to be a significant pusher of the success of that game.
Yeah.
To be that close to Skyrim.
Like I said, Skyrim I've been hearing about for 10 plus years. Witcher, I had never heard of until the Netflix show.
Yeah. I think you weren't alone in that.
Yeah.
So anyways, good for both of those franchises. Let's see. Capcom they had their 40th anniversary on June 11th. And as part of that, they launched a new website that has some playable games on it. I think there are currently 6 playable games on there, including Final Fight, which is a game that holds a special place in my heart because I remember spending a lot of time and money playing that game in the arcade. So you can go play that on Capcom's website now. This next one I just think is amazing.
This just made me giggle.
McDonald's is celebrating Grimace's birthday. So you've probably seen ads for this where they have a Grimace milkshake, which is purple. And you can get that part of a special meal with a cheeseburger or chicken McNuggets. But the thing that's really cool for our sake is that they have released a Grimace's birthday game. And you can play that game on a web browser. You can play it on your phone, actually, which is how I played it. But it is also a full Game Boy ROM. So you can actually download this ROM and you can put it onto an actual Game Boy hardware and play this game, and it will run and play on an actual Game Boy.
That just makes me so happy. Like, it feels very much like it's like putting it on Game Boy rather than putting it on, Switch or anything. It feels like it's a love letter to all of us who grew up with, the McDonald's Play Place and all of that. Like, I love that it's on Game Boy.
I will say, though, Grimace's birthday does sound like creepypasta-ish.
I know, I'm like, do children today know Grimace?
Do they want to?
Well, I mean, I don't think they care. I think you're right, Alicia. They're going for a very particular audience. They're going for 90s kids, right?
Yeah.
And putting it on the Game Boy is specifically going for that target demographic.
Yeah. It's absolutely a nostalgia play, and I'm here for it.
And I think that McDonald's is really losing out by not having people greet people in the drive-thru with, "Hi, are you craving my McNuggies?"
Oh, Jay.
But so if you don't know about Grimace, Grimace has an extended family too, including
know that,
aunties who have flowery dresses and purposes. There's Uncle O'Grimacy who brought Shamrock Shakes to the United States, and there's just a whole family.
Like the Grimace extended universe.
Yeah, and something to know though is that a lot of really young people don't know the whole McDonaldland family. So this might be really their first introduction to Grimace. Because I know all of them. I know Birdie. I know the
Mayor McCheese.
Yeah, Mayor McCheese, the Hamburglar,
Yeah.
who they had no right to make hot. But a few years ago, they made the Hamburglar really hot. Because he was very specifically not hot before, and then they made him hot.
That's who I was thinking of when you said hot. What?
No, there's a new one, and he's hot.
Oh no, he's hot.
Yeah, he's very hot. He's very attractive. And then
And I was thinking, I bet most people now, if you didn't grow up with all these characters, I remember, I think it was Avengers Infinity War, Star-Lord calls Thanos Grimace.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Right.
I think that was a lot of people now, their introduction to Grimace, when they're like, what the heck is this reference?
Right.
So if you go into McDonald's now, have you been in a McDonald's lately?
In the past month.
Okay,
but-
so they look like coffee shops now.
Oh, it's horrible.
They're completely bland.
It's disgusting. And even the ones that, we have one in town that still has a play place, but also you go in there and they have, little iPad things set up in there as well.
Yeah,
And it's...
you don't see any of the characters. There's no Ron
No.
McDonald or Grimace or
Yeah.
Birdie.
No,
those characters
I remember
don't
going,
exist.
I remember going and, one of the McDonald's that we went to when I was a kid, they literally had a bench there with the Ronald McDonald statue where you would sit and get your picture with Ronald.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I worked at McDonald's for quite a long time, actually, and the specific thing is that the casual dining fast food places were becoming so much more popular than fast food that they had to fight against it. So places like Chipotle, Panera, etc., they had to really try and corner that market, and so that's why they went towards a more adult audience rather than a kids audience here.
I get that, but I feel like you could have like something still there for kids, right?
Please bring back the play place in its full glory.
No.
Please.
For the sake of people who work there, I want to say do not do that.
I'm sorry, employees. Please force parents to watch their children when they're in the play place.
I lost a tooth in the play place, Alicia.
Right.
I'm not joking.
I got stuck in it when I was a kid.
I think that's exactly why it's gone. I think it's an insurance thing, probably more than anything.
Just makes me sad.
Yeah, people.
I agree. When I was a kid, we didn't have play places. We didn't have these like nice and like indoor ones and that were all carpeted and everything. You were outside with like the wood chips, and like if you've ever played on a wood chip playground, if you fall on those wood chips, they like stick in you.
Yeah.
Like they're like basically giant splinters.
Yeah.
And so like, you know, it wasn't really all that safe. And then they made the play place, which was like a safer version. And my understanding is that was really to compete with Chuck E. Cheese. And then now they're just mostly gone.
And here's the thing: somebody has to clean that slide. And
I'm sorry,
that's not my
employees.
at
problem.
least 2 or 3 times a week, someone pees at the top of the slide.
I'm surprised if it's only 2 or 3 times a week, honestly.
Well, I worked at a very slow McDonald's. Right.
I'm sorry, employees.
Slow at cleaning or slow at business?
A little both. But
I'm sorry, employees. Can we make parents watch their kids at the play place and bring it back?
By the way, if you're listening from home, pause and Google hot hamburglar really quickly because I'm going to show everyone a picture of the hot hamburger
I already
now. And okay, so here he is. He's making a little secret.
What?
He's like, hey, come over
Why
here.
is he so human?
Let's have an English. Yeah, it's an actual person.
Why is he so human?
right,
He's supposed
and
to be a burger.
Right, and he's like, shh. You want this big meat I got right here? Because this is an Angus burger, the big 3rd-pound burgers, and that's what they brought the Hamburglar for, right? And so he's sitting here being all sexy, posing with these, half-pound or 2/3 of a pound burgers right here, and it ruined my childhood. But also, I'm not complaining.
Did it really ruin your childhood then, or did it just ruin your childhood innocence?
Okay, there, yeah. Right. And I'm just surprised that Grimace didn't come out with, like, other things now. Grimace is still Grimace. He's a big taste bud. He is not... They didn't make a sexy Grimace.
Grimace
Purple
is not
Bear
to be
Daddy.
drawn like one of your French girls.
Right. Hamburglar, though, he can't go back from being sexy now.
The thing I'll say about like this Grimace birthday, like the advertising, they're not actually using Grimace a whole lot in it. They're using like the purple coloring.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like him as a character, they're still not using a whole lot, which is just disappointing.
I'll
Like,
say, I think I saw one thing on social media that had Grimace himself with it, and then everything else, like you said, has just been the purple.
Yeah.
and I will say that I went to McDonald's on the day that they were supposed to have those milkshakes, and I said, "Yeah, I want one of those Grimace milkshakes," and they're like, I guess we don't have those. And I was like, well, what is the point, McDonald's? And they're like,
Seriously?
do you want a vanilla shake? And I was like, obviously not. Nobody wants a vanilla milkshake, McDonald's.
If it's not Grimace, it's a no.
Don't make us get the Rick and Morty fans out on you, McDonald's.
So what they do have them now. You can go get one.
Well, not the
I know what I'm
McDonald's
doing for
I
dinner.
went to,
Okay.
I will say.
I know what I'm doing for dinner.
Yeah. So 2 is they're berry flavored.
I'll meet you up. We'll have Grimace milkshakes.
You're just
So-
going to get a message in our group chat in like 3 hours.
Hey, I'm not kidding. I will meet you at McDonald's for Grimace milkshakes.
Well, so I haven't had one yet, but I talked with a friend who works at McDonald's, and they said that it's berry flavored, but you don't know what berry it is. It's berry flavored, but it's not actually resembling a berry.
I mean,
it's
I
kind
was
of
thinking like grape.
Yeah,
would have been my
it was
thought.
not. It's not grape.
Okay.
But it's mixed berry, and the like Gatorade is like blue flavored.
Wait,
right?
is it dark blue or light blue Gatorade?
It's not. It doesn't taste like them. I'm just saying that we call Gatorade blue, light blue, and not the actual flavors that they're supposed to be. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
This is
Anyone who calls
this is a
Gatorade
purple.
anyone who calls Gatorade by its actual flavor is a serial killer.
Yeah.
No, I want a red Gatorade.
Right. Exactly. And this is kind of like that. It's berry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not an actual berry, but it's berry flavored.
Look, I'm eating at McDonald's. I have already given up on anything being like organic or
Or healthy in the slightest.
right.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'm also drinking a fast food milkshake.
Yeah.
I'm not deluding myself into thinking they're back there grinding up real grapes. For
Stepping
that-
on
Unless
them.
if they're taking a really long time to make it, because that's when you're like, okay, are you killing the cow back there? Are you grinding the grapes? Like, what's going on?
Well, especially when this is like a neon purple shake.
Yeah.
Like, this is not a naturally occurring color. I am under no delusions about what I'm drinking.
There's nothing unnatural about the Grimace, Justin.
All right. Let's
Grimace
see.
is nature.
So, it's our Activision news of the week.
Bum, bum, bum.
The FTC has received a temporary restraining order. The FTC here in the U.S. has received a temporary restraining order. This actually just happened last night, blocking the Microsoft Activision deal. So this delays it slightly from them being able to go forward with it. They are seeking a preliminary injunction. What I read, this is not my opinion, but third-party opinion that I read, that they are unlikely to get the preliminary injunction, which would be a more long-term delay of the deal. But they did get this temporary restraining order, which does delay it ever so slightly. Again, we'll see. I just don't see this being the fight that the FTC or the Biden administration want to pick right now. But we'll see. And the last thing is, just this morning, they released a trailer for a Dead Cells animated series, which at the end teases that it's coming in 2024. It's not much of a trailer. It just shows like a pile of bodies, and the main character's body is on top, and his head like flickers on like a lighter. So it's kind of like cute like that.
It's a pile of dead bodies. It's cute like that.
Well, if you play Dead Cells, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
It's cute for the Grimace, too.
But are we going to get... Do we know what... is it Cartoon Network? Is it like Netflix? Is it... Because I'm like, are we going to get a crossover with the Netflix Castlevania series for DLC?
No, that would be amazing. What I saw did not put a name forward that I was familiar with. I think the name that is mentioned in the trailer is the production company that's making it. And so it wasn't for a specific platform that I saw. So it may be something like they're producing this and still shopping it around to different platforms. Or maybe this is going to be something they just release onto the web. I don't know. So last thing here, we've been kind of running down the E3 schedule. There's only two things really left on the schedule at this point. There's the Grasshopper Direct, which happens late tonight, and then the Annapurna Interactive Showcase, which is June 29th. All right, that does it. Let's get to our big question. And as we're headed off into summer, we will not be back next week with an episode. I am going to be out of town. I believe OJ's going to be out of town. I don't know if either of you are going to be out of town as well. But we will not have an episode next week. I don't know when we'll be back for our next episode, but it'll be a big one. It'll be our 50th episode, so we'll have a big celebration. But it's middle of summer. People are headed to the beach and stuff. Not me, but theoretically, people are. And so the question for this week is, what's a great beach game? So sort of the thinking on this is maybe it's a game about the beach and going to the beach, or maybe it's a game that is, like a great beach read. Like, often talk about books that are good for the beach, which are kind of generally sort of lighthearted, maybe like a thriller or something, but like
A lighthearted thriller, as they are.
Well, you know what I mean. You're not reading Dostoevsky on the beach, generally speaking.
We're not.
Well, most people aren't, Ryan. We'll agree that maybe you are. So, Alicia, what is a great beach game, you think?
Well, it's funny because my first thought when I saw this was, oh dear, please don't bring your consoles to the beach. You're going to get sand in the charge ports. Like, it's going to get wet. But I think there are a couple of things that come to my mind. Like, the first thing that comes to my mind is probably the first Kingdom Hearts game. I think of when you're on Destiny Islands, like that beginning part. I remember
Very tropical.
like sitting there with especially like the first time we played, my sister and me, you know, of course she had to sit there and grind in the beginning, and I'm like, please get moving with the story. Oh my gosh. But she was just, you know, re-racing Riku until she could beat him, you know, playing with the other characters on the island. And I was like, this is like my thought for beach vibes. But then I feel like I do need to give an obligatory shout out here to Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, because 7.8, too much water. So lots of beach vibes from that. But honestly, I think if I was going to go for like a game that I would want to play sitting on the beach, assuming that I'm keeping my consoles away from getting sand in the charger or anything like that, because I'm very paranoid about that. Honestly, I was kind of thinking, I'm like, you know, I feel like I would want to go back and have the nostalgia of the original Pokemon Gold, Silver, Crystal era. And I don't know why it's Johto that stands out to me as like the ones I would want to play as like, I'm just having a chill time on the beach. But I think for me it would have to be, and not even Heart Gold, Soul Silver. I would want it to be the original Gen 2 Pokemon games.
All right. Ryan.
I had a couple thoughts. Like the one I probably actually would is like Animal Crossing New Horizons, just because it's a chill game. You have a beach in it. You could like maybe practice like playing around or decorating or fishing on that while you're on the beach instead of, you know, actually doing the things at the beach you're on. But I think that's like, that to me like feels like a chill, relaxed, fitting game for that. The other one I thought of was, and I think there was that Super Mario All-Star Pack that came out on the Switch a while back, so that'd be a way to play this. But the other one that to me seemed like a big choice was just because thematically, Super Mario Sunshine.
Yeah.
Because like,
Al Delfino.
Delfino, yeah, and like just like the tropical paradise of that place, and trying to clean it up, and it just thematically it felt like fitting. So
yeah, and there are levels that take place on the beach.
Yep.
So yeah, that's a good choice. OJ.
Okay, so when I read this question, and this is a weird nostalgia thing, the first thing that popped up for me was Skate or Die on the NES.
Yeah.
Because there was a beach level that you would play through and stuff like that. And I really enjoyed that game at the time. I'm sure if I went back and tried it, it would just be horrible and I wouldn't ever want to play it again. But I really enjoyed that game when it came out.
If you go back and play Skate or Die, you should play the Commodore 64 version.
Okay.
But that is a great game.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what I thought about when I thought about a game on the beach. And that's all I've been able to think about, which seems a little weird to me because I know there have been plenty of games on a beach. But then also thinking about what was the game that just came out too, Like a Dragon with Infinite Wealth. He woke up on a beach naked. So I mean, I guess it seems like it might be a great game. I don't know. I've never played any of that type of game before, but we'll see. But as far as something to play on a beach, I would think some type of like match 3 game would be really nice for being on a beach because you don't have to give it a whole bunch of attention. Like if someone starts playing volleyball, you can just turn and watch them and not have to worry about the game. If a bird flies over, that's all you have to do. And I always think that a lot of stuff is going to happen on the beach. It may or may not, but I also like to just like kind of people watch and sit back. So that's what I was thinking. Like a match 3 game would be really nice to play. Maybe Candy Crush.
You're thinking of the beach versus MTV Spring Break.
Yeah.
Like your imagined version in your head when you're headed to the beach is this is going to be MTV Spring Break versus the reality, which is just the beach.
Yeah, which is fair. And I grew up on Lake Michigan, so the beach was very different than MTV. But I still think about if I'm going on vacation, I think about that spring break type stuff.
Yeah.
So I'll just make sure I go to the beach on spring break, and then so I can people watch then. Because I did love MTV Spring Break. I watched it every year.
Yeah. So I wrote this and then I stopped and thought about it. And I think the most obvious answer for me would be Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball. The game where you have characters who play volleyball against one another, and then you can like buy them gifts of new bikinis and give them to them. And then there's a photo mode, because of course there is.
Oh my gosh.
The fact that that game ever got made is one of the most insane things in video game history. And it got made based on a very popular franchise, right? The Dead or Alive fighting games. So I just think about, like, you know, would we get a Mario game? Are we going to get a Mario?
So Mario Party 4 and 5 at least do have beach volleyball.
Yes, but you aren't able to give, like, Peach, like, new bikinis and take pictures of her.
I mean, there is nipple percent in Super Mario Odyssey speedrunning, so.
Okay, Alicia. I was trying to give Nintendo some benefit of the doubt there.
Oh, you can give Nintendo benefit. You can give Nintendo benefit of the doubt. It's Nintendo fans. You can't.
Well, yes, definitely. They are a bunch of perverts, as we all know. And then the other game I thought of was Link's Awakening, because that is on a tropical island, and there's the beach and everything on there. But I do think, like, if I'm thinking of a beach game, it is Dead or Alive is the one that comes to mind. Unfortunately, I feel like my mind's been poisoned. The other one, I guess I didn't think of before, would be Windjammers, because you do play that at least on a couple of different beach levels, and they have the beach games, like with the dog and everything, where you're throwing the frisbee for the dog. So I guess that's a good beach game as well.
So your Dead or Alive one reminded me of a game that came out a long time ago. It was on PlayStation 2, and it was BMX XXX.
Yep.
And so you could, when you were talking about, you can buy and take pictures of them with the bikinis, that had that, and you could also have, like, boobs out in the game at some point. So a PlayStation 2 game. I remember parents coming and, like, because I worked at Blockbuster at the time, and their parents complaining that children just came in. Because, so in the Blockbuster accounts, you could say, my children are allowed to get mature games and stuff like that. And people, and so, like, people said, yes, my kids can get mature games. And then they would get BMX XXX. And they were like, you just showed my 4-year-old titties. And I'm like, well, you
You're like,
said it was okay.
I didn't show them anything.
Yeah, you said it was okay.
Ma'am, I do not have those.
Yeah. That's what I thought about too. So I think about Skate or Die and BMX XXX with all this nostalgia. We're talking about the beach.
Yeah.
I love that this is like the stuff, and I'm like, you know, the last time I was on the beach was when I sat and listened to a 2-hour audiobook of the Final Fantasy VII novellas.
Alicia, I'm only saying this because you brought it up earlier. That is one of the nerdiest things I've ever heard. Going to the beach to listen to an audiobook of Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah, that was where I listened to the On the Way to a Smile Shinra chapter.
Yeah, the difference is Skate or Die is actually a really good, great game for its era. BMX Triple X is a terrible game.
Yeah. They just wanted to show titties on a game. That's the whole reason the game was made.
Well, I mean, they were making the game already, and the previous games in that franchise were not selling. So that was a previous series of, it was sort of a takeoff on Tony Hawk, but with bicycles.
Yeah.
And the previous games weren't selling, so when they were in the middle of developing that one, they were like, we have to do something different. What if we just put, nudity in this one?
Let's show pixel titties.
Yeah. I think there were, like, video clips in there, too, you could unlock.
Just have this image of Hank Hill going, whoa!
I think that was happening at a lot of homes. When little Billy brought that home, and his parents going, what did you get? And he's like, I got a BMX XXX game. And then parents being mortified.
Yeah.
I'm just imagining, like, OJ, you've talked before about, like, playing video games with your parents watching something on the TV, and then the video game TV directly below it, and like you're playing that game, and suddenly.
So, because a lot of the young people didn't realize that XXX meant, like, pornography. They thought it was like extreme.
Sports.
Yeah. BMX XXX extreme. But no, that's not what it was.
That's really funny. Like we really poisoned an entire generation. Everything in the 90s had to have, like, we're going to drop the E. It's just X stream. It's the X games. Yeah, I can completely believe a kid would walk in.
I feel like I feel like now that you brought that game up, I remember it. And I never played it, but I remember seeing it, and never would have guessed at that age that it was going to be nudity.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a few games like that there's always games that get sort of released independently, but like that actually got released onto consoles and everything with nudity and stuff in them. So there was what was it, the Man game, which was sort of a take on Jackbox meets Girls Gone Wild, and so. It was like a It was like a trivia game, but like you got rewarded for getting the trivia questions by clips that were basically from a beach. So like I guess this is another beach game, but it was like girls at a beach flashing you their breast. And the thing is, that game ended up getting pulled from shelves because they did not actually have the rights to. Like the signed off, and I think actually it went further than that. I think some of the young women were actually under 18.
Oh man!
And had lied and signed off on a form, but like weren't actually of age to be able to sign off on that. And
that is just a nightmare.
That game got pulled. I think that's the correct story of why that game got pulled. But like. That was another attempt. So they keep doing this every. I feel like in the like late 90s, early 2000s was kind of the heyday of like, let's put nudity in video games. This will sell it to like more people, and not. It was like this sort of insecurity that video games weren't enough just to sell to people, that you had to throw something else in there. And of course, sex sells, but like. Pornography is very different than like the shows you're watching on Apple TV or HBO. I mean,
is
maybe
it
not
from HBO?
Fair point. But like I would say, certainly there are people who enjoy the nudity in a show like Game of Thrones, but like that's not why people are watching that show for the most part, right? And
something like Game of Thrones, I have not watched Game of Thrones. I might read the books one day, but I refuse to watch the show just because I know how bad it gets.
Yeah.
But from what I've heard, it's real, like the nudity and all that is a lot more extreme in the first couple seasons for the shock value to get people hooked, and then once you get further in, like you said, people weren't really watching for that.
Right.
Well, it's like The Sopranos, where their sort of base where they operated out of was a strip club. So there would just be scenes in that show where you have these characters having these like very in-depth conversations. In the background, there's some woman dancing topless, and you're like, it's almost a distraction while you're watching it. Like, get her off the screen. I don't care anything about what she's doing. Like, I understand there's a minimum amount of nudity you have to have in every episode, but like
the HBO clause.
Well, this is off topic, but like the TV show Party Down that was on originally Showtime. There's a famous story from that show, which is the sitcom about out-of-work actors working for a catering company in Los Angeles. It's a very good show, and lots of like up-and-coming actors were on that show when it originally came on, like Adam Scott and Lily Kaplan before they got really big. But the thing that's really funny is they were producing that show, and they made the first few episodes of the season, and the network came to them and said, hey, there's nothing to sell people on this show. Like, you need to put more nudity into this show. And they were like, we're caterers. Like, how are we going to have nudity in our show? Like,
that's the best response to that demand.
And they're like,
we're
no,
caterers.
You need to work it in there. So there's an episode of that show that takes place at the Adult Video Awards. And the entire reason they wrote that episode was just to get nudity into it.
Oh my gosh.
So there's just like porn stars walking around nude in the background of that episode. And it's still this just like dumb sitcom, but like it takes place at those awards. And I love that story. Like the creators of that show just going, we don't know what to do. All right. That's completely off topic. But that does it for this week's episode. As we said, we will not be back next week. I don't know when the next episode will be because there's people moving in and out of town. Then we're coming up on holidays with 4th of July. But we'll be back soon with another episode. That will be episode 50. So we'll try to actually get everyone into a room and actually do a full episode for that because that'll be exciting. 50 episods. That's pretty amazing. Like basically a little less than a year and a half, we've got to 50 episodes. Especially when you consider all of our schedules and everything, like meeting up for that. So that'll be exciting to do. That'll be a big milestone. Thank you again, Alicia, OJ, and Ryan for being here.
Thank you, Justin, for doing this.
Well, you are welcome, Alicia. We'll be back soon with another episode. Thank you for listening, and check out SalukiGames.com. Bye.